and I believe that what is true for America is true for virtually all mature democracies. And that is no accident. We can be proud of our nations. Without defining ourselves in opposition to some other group. We can be patriotic without demonizing someone else. We can cherish our own identities, our religion, our ethnicity, our traditions without putting others down. Our systems are premised on the notion that absolute power will corrupt. But that ordinary people are fundamentally good, that they value family and friendship, faith, and the dignity of hard work. And that with appropriate checks and balances, governments can reflect this goodness. I believe that's the future we must seek together. To believe in the dignity of every individual, to believe we can bridge our differences. And choose cooperation over conflict. That is not weakness, that is strength. It is a practical necessity in this interconnected world. And our people understand this. Think of the Liberian doctor who went door to door to search for Ebola cases. And to tell families what to do if they show symptoms. Think of the Iranian shopkeeper who said, after the nuclear deal, God willing, now we'll be able to offer many more goods at better prices. Think of the Americans who lowered the flag over our embassy in Havana in 1961, the year I was born, and returned this summer to raise that flag back up. One of these men said of the Cuban people, we could do things for them. And they could do things for us. We loved them. For 50 years, we ignored that fact. Think of the families leaving everything they've known behind. Risking barren deserts and stormy waters just to find shelter, just to save their children. One Syrian refugee who was greeted in Hamburg with warm greetings and shelter. Said, "We feel there are still some people who love other people. The people of our United Nations are not as different as they are told. They can be made to fear, they can be taught to hate, but they can also respond to hope. History is littered with the failure of false prophets and fallen empires who believed that might always makes right. And that will continue to be the case. You can count on that. But we are called upon to offer. A different type of leadership strong enough to recognize that nations share common interests and people share a common humanity. And, yes, there are certain ideas and principles that are universal. That's what those who shaped the United Nations 70 years ago understood. Let us carry forward that faith into the future, for it is the only way. We can assure that future will be brighter for my children, and for yours. Thank you very much. Barack Obama. Final address to the United Nations General Assembly. Delivered September 20, 2016, New York, New York. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. As I address this hall as President for the final time, let me recount the progress that we've made these last 8 years. from the depths of the greatest financial crisis of our time. We coordinated our response to avoid further catastrophe and return the global economy to growth. We've taken away terrorist safe havens, strengthened the non-proliferation regime. Resolved the Iranian nuclear issue through diplomacy. We opened relations with Cuba, helped Colombia end Latin America's longest war. And we welcome a democratically elected leader of Myanmar to this assembly. Our assistance is helping people feed themselves, care for the sick. Power communities across Africa, and promote models of development rather than dependence. And we have made international institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund more representative. While establishing a framework to protect our planet from the ravages of climate change. This is important work. It has made a real difference in the lives of our people. And it could not have happened had we not worked together. And yet, around the globe we are seeing the same forces of global integration that have made us interdependent, also expose deep fault lines in the existing international order. We see it in the headlines every day. Around the world, refugees flow across borders in flight from brutal conflict. Financial disruptions continue to weigh upon our workers and entire communities. Across vast swaths of the Middle East, basic security, basic order has broken down. We see too many governments muzzling journalists, and quashing dissent, and censoring the flow of information. Terrorist networks use social media to prey upon the minds of our youth. Endangering open societies and spurring anger against innocent immigrants and Muslims. Powerful nations contest the constraints placed on them by international law. This is the paradox that defines our world today. A quarter century after the end of the Cold War, the world is by many measures less violent and more prosperous than ever before. And yet our societies are filled with uncertainty, and unease, and strife. Despite enormous progress, as people lose trust in institutions. Governing becomes more difficult and tensions between nations become more quick to surface. And so I believe that at this moment we all face a choice. We can choose to press forward with a better model of cooperation and integration. Or we can retreat into a world sharply divided, and ultimately in conflict. Along age-old lines of nation and tribe and race and religion. I want to suggest to you today that we must go forward, and not backward. I believe that as imperfect as they are, the principles of open markets and accountable governance, of democracy and human rights and international law that we have forged remain the firmest foundation for human progress in this century. I make this argument not based on theory or ideology, but on facts that all too often, we forget in the immediacy of current events. Here's the most important fact. The integration of our global economy has made life better for billions of men, women, and children. Over the last 25 years, the number of people living in extreme poverty has been cut from nearly 40% of humanity to under 10%. That's unprecedented. And it's not an abstraction. It means children have enough to eat, mothers don't die in childbirth. Meanwhile, cracking the genetic code promises to cure diseases that have plagued us for centuries. The internet can deliver the entirety of human knowledge to a young girl in a remote village on a single handheld device. In medicine and in manufacturing, in education and communications. We're experiencing a transformation of how human beings live on a scale that recalls the revolutions in agriculture and industry. And as a result, a person born today is more likely to be healthy, to live longer. And to have access to opportunity than at any time in human history. Moreover, the collapse of colonialism and communism has allowed more people than ever before to live with the freedom to choose their leaders. Despite the real and troubling areas where freedom appears in retreat. The fact remains that the number of democracies around the world has nearly doubled in the last 25 years. In remote corners of the world, citizens are demanding respect for the dignity of all people no matter their gender. Or race, or religion, or disability. Or sexual orientation, and those who deny others dignity are subject to public reproach. An explosion of social media has given ordinary people more ways to express themselves. and has raised people's expectations for those of us in power. Indeed, our international order has been so successful that we take it as a given that great powers no longer fight world wars. That the end of the Cold War lifted the shadow of nuclear Armageddon. That the battlefields of Europe have been replaced by peaceful union, that China and India remain on a path of remarkable growth. I say all this not to whitewash the challenges we face, or to suggest complacency. Rather, I believe that we need to acknowledge these achievements in order to summon the confidence to carry this. Progress forward, and to make sure that we do not abandon those very things that have delivered this progress. In order to move forward, though, we do have to acknowledge that the existing path to global integration requires a course correction. As too often, those trumpeting the benefits of globalization have ignored inequality within and among nations. Have ignored the enduring appeal of ethnic and sectarian identities. Have left international institutions ill-equipped, underfunded, under-resourced, in order to handle transnational challenges. And as these real problems have been neglected, alternative visions of the world have pressed forward both in the wealthiest countries and in the poorest, religious fundamentalism, the politics of ethnicity, or tribe. Or sect, aggressive nationalism, a crude populism sometimes from the far left. But more often from the far right, which seeks to restore what they believe was a better, simpler age free of outside contamination. We cannot dismiss these visions. They are powerful. They reflect dissatisfaction among too many of our citizens. I do not believe those visions can deliver security or prosperity over the long term. But I do believe that these visions fail to recognize, at a very basic level, our common humanity. Moreover, I believe that the acceleration of travel and technology and telecommunications, together with a global economy that depends on a global supply chain,